Hi everyone, so the PTR is up and I've just finished my first big testing session. I've been streaming for just short of 13 hours and I want to give you the few highlights of the day basically. I know you guys have a lot of questions about all kinds of things. Here I mostly want to show off the new soul shards from the season theme, which are absolutely amazing. So they really surpassed my expectations in what they do and how powerful they are, and I think that devs really did a overall really good job at creating something really cool and impactful. So they look like this here, and you can find a total of 7 different ones of them, and there are 3 that are from the prime evils which go into your helms, and there's 4 from the lesser evils that go into your weapons. You're supposed to have only 1 in a weapon. Right now there's a bug where people are dual wielding them, which you can do by equipping the weapon and then socketing the gem into it. But you're supposed to have only 1 of them, and well, they are pretty strong and have very interesting effects, even with some downsides attached to them. So first of all, the gems will have all the combined stats of all the flawless royal forms in the helm or the weapon respectively, on top of some extra effects. So for example, for the helm gem we have the amethyst that gives the life, we have the diamond with the cooldown, with the topaz with the research cost, and we even have the ruby for XP and the emerald for gold. The same thing with the weapons. So there's the crit damage from the emerald, there's the flat damage from the ruby, there's the elite damage from the diamond, there's the life bridge from the amethyst, and there's the thorns damage from the topaz. So this is present on every single one of them, and when you find a level 0 one, it will actually look a bit different. So I can just make a fresh one here right now and show you. So when you find one fresh, it will look like this. And they seem to be dropping like left and right, even without the PTR bonus loot buff. I think you're not going to have any trouble acquiring any of them. They seem to be dropping from very early level, already at level 1 I think you can get them. And then they have these question mark special effects that will unlock once you upgrade them. So you do this with a Hellforged Ember. This seems to be pretty much the same as a Remnant's gift, just another item in the loot table, so it's not super common, and this is actually the limiting resource here. But you can use those and then you put it on, and the first upgrade will give you those flawless royal effects as I mentioned, on top of the special effect of the gem itself. And when you do a second upgrade, you will add 1 random stat, which in this case for the helm sockets can be around 1000 main stat or vitality. It can be some auras, some armor, and a pretty good chunk of melee and range reduction. And finally, when you do the third upgrade, you get another special effect that either interacts with the first one or is in some way just themed around the item. So in this case, we have the Shard of Hatred, and the base effect is this: you deal victims and reduce damage while there's 3 or fewer enemies, and you deal more damage when there's many enemies around you. And then you have like an extra effect with movement speed is increased, and then with many enemies around you, you have reduced movement speed. So obviously this is some kind of like AoE focused gem that you want to use here for big AoE damage. And there is like 3 different special effects that you can roll on the 3rd rank. I'm going to show you all of them here. So ignore like the first 5 lines or so, which is all like the typical gem stats from your helm, and just look at the special effects. We always have this last point here with the 50% reduced damage while there's 3 or fewer enemies, and then you have these 3 different special effects. Here is another one that pulls all enemies together in a 40-yard radius, which is actually very large, so it's almost the entire screen when you finish an elite target. Here's this movement speed increase that we just had, and here is the 3rd version where you deal 50% increased damage for every enemy around you instead of 10%. So this is the one buffing the primary effect, so to say. A little bit like some legendary gems. Here is the next gem. This is the Diablo one that also goes into your helm. So this one has the effect, the base effect, that your cooldowns are increased by 25%. So you actually get minus cooldown reduction. You can actually go into minus. And then for every skill on cooldown, you take 12.5% reduced damage and deal 75% increased damage. Now this is definitely by far the most massive gem of the entire season, I believe. So many builds will make great use of this. In some builds it's going to be very extreme. For example, some Crusader builds have lots of cooldown. Something like Valor that has Iron Skin, Akarat's Champion, Judgment, Heaven's Fury. You can run with like 5 cooldown skills and get almost quadruple damage, or even more even. And on top of that, you get lots of damage reduction. This thing is absolutely insane. So this seems to be like the go-to gem basically for helmets, unless you have a build that cannot really stick in any extra cooldowns. So for example, something like Archon builds probably have a tough time actually stacking up some cooldowns that would really help you here. So you probably go for another one, but I believe that most builds will try to play around this gem, either by going full face roll, having everything on cooldown all the time for this damage buff and the damage reduction buff, or by actually sticking in extra cooldowns that weren't really previously part of the build because they give you so much power. Now the secondary effect here is this attack speed and crit chance are increased by 7% for each skill on cooldown. This is quite powerful as well. So if you imagine again, like let's say 3 skills on cooldown, it's like straight up 21% crit, 21% attack speed, pretty strong. Here the secondary effect is if 3 or more skills are on cooldown, your lightning and fire skill damage is increased by 50%. So this is actually quite interesting. So this only works for certain builds, but it could also convert this to other builds with SOJ. This actually works because this gives you sheet fire damage. So this will be changed by SOJ in case you want to try something like that. And he has also the ring of fire that you spawn after 50 kills. So there's like a little indicator on your buff bar, and then after 50 kills you get like some ground effect. It's similar to the one that Diablo casts when he throws a fireball at you. It doesn't seem very powerful yet, but we will see if you can scale this in some way. So it seems to scale with your overall damage multipliers. So maybe it has a bit of merit. Here's the third gem that goes into a helm, which is the Fragment of Destruction, the one from Bale. This is some kind of like more support oriented or speed farming oriented. Essentially it gives you something like a Messerschmitt Reaver effect by marking enemies you run through, and if they die a few seconds later they will give you like a cooldown reduction. Nothing really crazy. I think compared to the other two that can go in the helm, this is extremely weak, and if anything will be used in something like a bounty build or T16 build where your damage doesn't really matter in most cases. But for the most part, I guess you're just gonna go with the other gems. There are some special effects, like you restore some health when you kill one of these marked targets. There's also another one where it has a longer duration, which seems even more pointless. And then there is another one where you have the Trail of Fire that kills enemies below 10% health. I mean, you have a bit of an executioner effect. Also, nothing really crazy, but I guess there might be some niche, especially like support uses for this. But yeah, we'll see. So far, this doesn't really impress me at all. I think this should be buffed in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's it for the helmet gems. I can also show you quickly like a variety of these different stats here. So you can see there's the random stats. If you look at the top of the stat table here, there's a 1000 int. Here's some 740 armor, 729 armor, some 600 auras. This seems like an extremely high value and definitely the best stat to get on these. And then there's also here melee, damage reduction, and all this kind of stuff. So there's like a little bit of a range on all these stats, but not really much. For example, the cooldown goes from 12.5 to 15, and the same with the resource, and then this range reduction goes from 15 to 20. So there's like a bit of variety in the roles, so we can decide, for example, after the first upgrade that you put on your gem, to maybe just go for the next gem and try to get better values. But overall this will not be very impactful. You most likely just want to upgrade the right gem to get the right power at the third stage, and once you get that, you can maybe start focusing on trying to craft like a really good one with high rolls, but it won't matter too much, I think. Now here are the weapon sockets. They're also very powerful. Here the random stats are also very extreme, and this is actually where most of the RNG will reside. So there can be a local up to 50% damage increase to your weapon. As you can see here in the second line, 50% damage on the weapon is a massive bonus. There's also some really high elemental damage bonuses, which you can find here. For example, fire skills 66%, cold skills 73%. I think this rolls from 50 to 75. So it actually makes it so that you have like a massive amount of elemental damage here. There's also some other stuff like a bit of attack speed. Right now, I guess you could use this on some sort of support build, but it doesn't really seem useful. Maybe Zunimasa might want this. That's about the only thing I can think of. There's also a crit chance random roll. But yeah, aside from this, you get all the Flawless Warrior gems again. And there's also a bit of a range. So for example, the crit damage can go all the way up to 150. And the flat damage can go to 300 from like 260, I think, or something like that. Now for the special effect of this Anguish, this is actually a super powerful gem. So this gives you a lot of movement speed and cooldown reduction up to 50% each. But it also increases your damage received by 50%. So that's actually a really cool downside. Definitely a strong gem, especially for farming, but also in pushing. I imagine a lot of builds are going to try to stick this in because of this insane cooldown reduction. Now here is the secondary effect. When you deal poison damage to an enemy, they also receive 50% increased poison damage from all sources. This works for party members. And this poison damage effect right now actually works with the poison damage roll on the weapon. So here for my Yanks, for example, I have poison damage, and this actually applies to the gem. I've tried some other things like Pus Spitter and some other items and Toxin Gem. All this stuff don't work where I actually deal poison damage, but this does work. And poison skills like on the Witch Doctor or Necromancer also work. So I'm not quite sure if this is intended, but this is what it is right now. So this is an extremely powerful gem because this is a 50% multiplier on top of the movement speed and the cooldown reduction. There's also one where this can stack up to 15 times, so you get 75% movement speed and 75% cooldown reduction. That's essentially a permanent channeling pylon. You can get something like 98% cooldown reduction, have everything up instantly all the time. It's going to be pretty crazy for some of the classes, especially something like Land of the Dead, Army of the Dead, or Necromancer, or some similar effects on other classes where you can just like mega spam all your stuff. And the last secondary effect is that your killing blow damage will be spread to all enemies in 25 yards radius. Now this is actually a very curious one because it's gonna benefit especially like very slow hitting, hard hitting builds, something like POJ Monk, Fan of Knives, Star Packed Wizard. So I don't think it's gonna bring back Star Packed Wizard, but theoretically this is like a straight up ×2 multiplier to the damage of a Star Packed Meteor, because if you kill something you will just explode twice. So quite curious, I really like this effect. And it is also quite buggy right now, so this damage can actually apply to the Sever Sword, which does lead to another exploit that we had some fun with earlier. So I've cleared 150 with this using a Impale Demon Hunter wearing Sever and that gem, and the supposedly cosmetic damage numbers could actually be applied to this effect. Under certain conditions it can proc and basically one-shot everything. So quite funny. Obviously this is gonna get fixed, but it is definitely a very interesting gem here and also very powerful. The next one is the Remnant of Pain. This is the dual one. So here this is based around crits. This is essentially like the Buriza Dokianon gem from the Ethereals. So the last line here is critical hit chance is reduced by 15% and attacks against incapacitated enemies are automatic critical strikes. So this works with freeze, stun, blind, fear, charm, not immobilize, and also not soft CCs like slow and chill. But it does have a pretty wide range of applications, very easy to proc on some builds or even proc by default, so can be quite powerful and potentially enable quite interesting setups. Also what it does is that it allows you to go Broken Promises and have guaranteed 0% crit chance to proc Broken Promises regularly with only a 1.25 seconds downtime, which is the minimum cooldown that the ring has. So this will be quite curious to see if anyone will make such a setup, maybe where you don't really want to fit in like an Endless Walk, you can maybe stick in a Squirt's Necklace and the Broken Promises instead, and that might actually turn out to be better when you're using this gem. So quite interesting. The first secondary effect on this gem is when you critically hit an enemy, you increase the attack speed of all players by 5% for 5 seconds, maximum 10 stacks. So this is a bit weird wording, but essentially this is a party buff. It doesn't stack, I tried this. In fact, none of these legendary gems or soul shard effects stack. So I tried all of them that can be applied to monsters or to party members. Like this 50% increased poison damage doesn't work. And also this attack speed can stack. and there's also another one that you're gonna see in a moment. So it's only one per party that you need. But yeah, definitely very powerful, 50% attack speed, 100% crit chance. You can see that some of these gems are pretty nuts. Here's another one that is kind of weird. It's basically like a speed pylon. So the secondary effect gives you like a knockback and a stun effect. Can be useful. It does proc the gem itself. I guess that's quite nice, but other than that, nothing really crazy. I guess most people would probably prefer just the faster movement speed and the cooldown reduction from the anguish here. And lastly, here's also some kind of like frost burn effect where you have a high chance to freeze enemies with cold attacks, and then frozen targets take 20% more damage. This is a multiplier. I tested this, and it does not work on the freezing hit, only on subsequent hits. Here's the Dregs of Lies, that's the Belial one. This is the support gem, so this goes into the weapon of support characters and has this reduced enemy damage by 33%, but your own damage is also reduced by 50%. And then there's one secondary effect with a cheat death proc that spawns a shadow and heals you and all these kind of things. Then the second one has a secondary effect where each elite enemy slain reduces all your active cooldowns by 5 seconds, so a bit like a mini Engeum effect. I guess you can actually stack this with Engeum to get like even more cooldown reduction. So this could be used on like a support build for speed farming, I guess, to make it a bit more smooth. And here's the real choice that you want to have, where the damage reduction is doubled after you crit an enemy. So you can get 66% damage reduction. This is absolutely insane for a support setup. So someone in the party needs to have this, and it's just gonna make everyone super tanky. It's actually crazy. And lastly, here's the Stain of Sin. So this is also quite curious one. It has a very interesting visual effect, which is like this Asmonon huge pool of blood. And here you by default deal only 75% of your damage, but when you kill an elite enemy, you spawn a pool of blood, and you deal 250% more damage to non-elite targets for 7 seconds. This is a very curious effect, but overall I don't think this is competitive with especially the Anguish and the Pain gems here for your weapon slot. I tried to do a bit of like napkin math and think about if this could be used in like a low solo push build, for example. But it also has very weird behavior. So first of all, you deal less damage all the time, and then you have to somehow finish an elite target, which will take forever because you already started with less damage, and then you deal more damage against, well, the surviving few non-elites that are around. And usually most builds only kill non-elites anyway when they push, because they don't have the damage to kill any elites. So it's a bit weird, and I'm not really sure which build is supposed to actually use that gem. And with the very small uptime of only 7 seconds, in a per scenario, you're not gonna proc this very often. I tested this a little bit, and it does actually proc from illusionist skills though. So theoretically, you could try to open some big map and have an illusionist pack right at the start, and then kill some illusionist minion sometimes and get this proc. But even so, even when you assume like a very optimistic uptime of, let's say, 1/3 of the time, so let's say 5 minutes out of a 50 minutes run, it still seems absolutely terrible. So I'm not really sure what to do with this. It does have definitely one of the most interesting effects, but it is also kind of weird and weak. I think this is something that probably has to be adjusted in some way. In any case, the secondary effects here are interesting as well. So here this blood collects the rift progress orbs. That's quite funny, I think, so you can just rush through the rift and yeah, not really worry. Then you have a freeze for all non-elite enemies, and the third one is that it negates elite affixes in its area. So all quite interesting, but in the end, nothing really fancy, nothing really that powerful that you would really say wow when you see these Anguish and Pain gems. I think these are really the highlight here in terms of like the power in the weapon. And then you have this Terror gem that will probably apply to most builds for this big damage increase based on your cooldowns. And if you have a build that really can't use this cooldown stacking effect, you go with the Shadow Hater in your Helm for the overall like higher AoE damage that you're gonna have. So this is the overview of all the gems. To give my 2 cents for the whole thing, I really like the season theme. I am impressed by the creativity and also by just how cool they feel to use and to explore. But there is definitely some balancing that needs to be done, in my opinion. Especially for the weapon slot, this Stain of Sin seems kind of odd and really out of place and not really like it fits anywhere, besides maybe some weird speedfarming builds where you really don't want to go with one of the others. And also here, like this Fragment of Destruction in the Helm just seems so weak and like it's not really doing anything. Even on a support character, you just stick this in because there's nothing else basically, and this can also probably be adjusted. I mean, this is the Lord of Destruction. Why is there not some insane, like crazy damage buff or something on it? Or maybe some kind of like on-kill proc that would actually help you a bit more than a bit of cooldown reduction, which you can already get in huge quantities just from the Anguish. But in general, those soul shards definitely make the season very exciting, and the theory crafting and just thinking about the possibilities is amazing. So you can really take any build and try to stick in different gems and try to make use of them the best way possible. It's going to be a fun few weeks probably of theory crafting for everyone, and I believe this is even going to carry into the season with people trying out their own little variations here and there of trying to stick in like another cooldown skill for the Sliver of Terror perhaps, or maybe not go with any cooldowns at all and try something with the Shard of Hatred, and we'll just see what will happen to some of the builds. Also, seeing all these shards here, I have to say that this makes me very hopeful for a future update to the actual legendary gems in the game, because if you look at those shards compared to some very bland effects that we get from legendary gems, I believe that an overall is definitely in order at this point. Half of these gems are not even used for anything like at all, ever, and most of the others are very boring in what they do, and there's very little variation and very little like choices involved most of the time. Here it definitely seems like with those new shards there is really potential to spice things up for at least the season, and I'm really looking forward to just having a great time with them. In terms of overall power level and power creep, these soul shards are probably stronger than the Ethereals for pretty much every single build in the game, especially when you consider something like a 300% damage bonus just from like a Helm gem, not even counting the fact that you can wear one of these as well. It's gonna be really crazy what we can do. I believe this is gonna be tuned down a little bit, and maybe some of the other numbers gonna be adjusted a little bit, and well, we'll see about the destruction. I think this could definitely see a bit of like a rework. This seems very pointless most of the time. And I think also that the support legendary gem, especially Dregs of Lies, should not really have this effect. Group play is already so much more powerful than solo play. We don't need to have some super easy mode with this like party buff and like damage reduction for everyone. I think making Dregs of Lies into an actual viable solo choice would be quite interesting as well, to give even more variety to the weapon socket slot. This is kind of unnecessary, and this is just kind of weak, so those two should probably also see a bit of overall. And with this, I'm going to close this video for now, so I hope you enjoyed this overview. I have a lot more stuff coming up in the near future, so stay tuned. I'll be streaming on Twitch every day. I'm going to be blasting the PTR, going to test a lot of builds, and obviously make the videos for you guys. So hope you enjoyed this one, and see you guys next time.